It is a tremendous pleasure to share with you concerning my new book on the architecture of Peter Rich, which was published by Lund Humphreys UK in October 2020. The book has 184 pages, 20 color plates, and some 100 black and white illustrations. It's a tremendous joy to have one's work published as a book, and in this case it's with a really good fine arts and design publishing house. It's a beautiful book. The Architecture of Peter Rich, Conversations with Africa. That second part of the title is important, Conversations with Africa, because the book is about art, architecture, and all those human questions of identity and belonging, which are just never clear-cut. Conversations are required. We need to listen, observe, converse, and learn. So why Peter? Well, he's one of a kind, original, quirky, and unique. His work stands out. It's local, but has won international acclaim, and that matters. Peter is seen here in the landscape at Mapungubwe, with the building he is arguably best known for in the background, about which I wrote, quote, "Rich is caught in motion, looking forward, a restless soul, a traveller, always moving on." This book is the result of some 5 years of writing and research. A key aspect of my method involved conversations with Peter. I recorded and had transcribed no less than 20 hours of interviews with Peter, and a further 20 with others who were involved, and from which I quote extensively in the narrative. I always prepare considered questions ahead of my interviews, but in session things tend to go free range, and I enjoy the improvisational aspect of this, which stimulates thought and discovery. I also had the pleasure of working with a professional photographer, Barry Goldman, whom I accompanied on photographic excursions across South Africa. It was important to work closely with Barry to achieve the exact right shots, ones that might enrich the narrative, and nearly all the colour photographs are entirely original, selected for the book. You can see us here, the Three Stooges, on our way back from a wonderfully mad weekend in the bush, and we just had to stop for this one, taken below the Tropic of Capricorn road sign. My research required an extensive study of Peter's digital archive, collating drawings, models, and historical photographs. In some cases, drawings were inadequately scanned or were damaged and had to be redrawn, and Peter kindly agreed to make entirely new drawings to aid the narrative, like this one of his house in Westridge. It was essential to visit the buildings, to linger and breathe in the atmosphere, to find those special places and moments that might bring life to the narrative. Drawing is very important for Peter, and it has occurred to me that he draws in at least 3 separate ways. He draws descriptively, as indicated on the left, this being the Circular Palace, an Ndebele settlement that he measured. Indeed, for some 10 years, from 1977 onward, Peter measured and drew numerous Ndebele settlements, importantly before they were forcibly removed. And this documentation provided the basis for his research masters on the architecture of the Ndebele, which was awarded in 1991. But Peter also draws in a more poetic way. Shown at centre, he travels with a sketchbook and a black Lamy pen. He has literally thousands of architectural travel sketches that deserve a book all of their own. This poetic mode attempts to capture an urban scene, an ambience, or a sense of light, as here inside a Kapur temple in India. And you can just feel the spiritual atmosphere in this beautiful and mysterious drawing. And finally, Peter also makes what I like to call analogical drawings that link between realms, combining desires with imagination, with objects and persons, and of course architecture. This, a recent drawing of 2021, shows the rear garden at his house in Westridge, with fish from sculptor Jackson Hlongwane, whose New Jerusalem Acropolis site inspired the landscaping of the garden, and body parts that morph into sculptures, that morph into architecture. Noting Peter's nose and eye on the left, and that of his wife Di's on the right. And I think these drawings provide clues as to how Peter imagines and creates architecture. I now wish to speak to three themes that are developed by the book, namely vernacular translations, social architecture, and organicism. Peter's documentation of Ndebele architecture and his related master's study established his leading ideas about architecture, space, and society. Others have studied Ndebele wall art, the beadwork, their rituals and customs. But what Peter did was to show how all of this integrates into a coherent spatial order, one that is staged by architecture. Just look at this beautiful beaded apron shown above. Consider the sophistication of the geometry that here plays with up and down, left and right, center and periphery, duality, symmetry and diagonal tension. And the iconography, where buildings and humans are interchangeable, and the artful ambiguities of elevation and plan. Now placing this in a direct relation to an Ndebele homestead shown below, and I think we immediately see what Peter was trying to understand. I made this drawing to understand the trajectory of his early work, which was inspired by lessons learned from the Ndebele, and which moves from a pure statement of the object and its order onto an ever increasingly subtle and organic exploration of symmetry and order. With Elam depicted at the top left, where we clearly see the ordered object, through to Menor at the bottom right, where spatialized objects are held within an implied play of symmetry and order. A subsequent body of work concerns various social projects, the most important of which is the Alexander Heritage Center, which took an astonishing 16 years to complete, and arguably is still not entirely complete, and which Peter describes as his monumental effort. So here we are in Alexandra Township, which is a really tough and challenging context, one that Peter wanted to appreciate and understand. He listens carefully to the textures and the informal character of the town, and looks for potential within what one might merely dismiss as squalor. This project came about because Mandela lived for a short while in Alex in 1940. His room is marked with a dot in the drawing. Peter was involved with the early heritage assessment document. He measured and documented the entire area, every single dwelling, the cars, the furniture, to capture the urban life. And he went in alone with a 5-meter tape, with children helping him to measure, and got invited in for tea, so he got to know the community. It was a full immersion. Here we see the street blocks on the outside with the more intricate pattern of courtyards and interconnecting paths on the inside. Peter tells that this gave him the concept for his design, which takes a path that connects between two courts, inverts it to form a solid building, then floats it above the street to form a dramatic portal and to preserve as far as possible the fine grain of the urban ground. The architecture clearly resonates with the tough urbanity, whilst providing a triumphant symbol of hope. An audacious flyover bridge uplifts the dense urbanity of the town, yet with a careful consideration of the ground plane, with raised public spaces, providing opportunities to sit and play, feeding back into the public life of Alex. Now finally, to consider Peter's more recent move towards organicism. And it must be said that the organic was right there at the start, in the stone terraced walls that build the landscape of his home at Westridge. But this new architectural manner comes to fullness at the Mapungubwe Interpretation Centre, photographed here in the raw and mythical landscape that surrounds, with Peter just visible to the right of the frame. And these magnificent drawings for the Kanidurt Cultural and Education Centre, but which was never built, onto Wushan, near the Anji Mountains in China. This, the waterfall, a landscaped intervention that transitions with the lake, with retreat accommodation and various amenities. And lastly, Peter's 2018 design for the Venice Biennale, which he calls his Temple of Light, and which I used to close my narrative, because here the early geometric and later organic character of his work combine and unexpectedly synthesize.